I'm Marcus White, leader of Everyone is God, Britain's most visionary political party. I want to solve every problem in Britain, and I want to see everyone fulfilled. This is a podcast of hard questions. See me cross-examined. Do I have the answers? Do I really have a plan that works? Ask your questions and decide for yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Everyone is God political podcast. I am one of your co-hosts today, Brudsy, and I'm joined with the lovely Marcus White. Marcus.
Hi, yes, I'm Marcus White, leader of Everyone is God, Britain's most visionary political party, and I'm looking forward to questions from the public today. I believe, Brad, that you've collated a list of questions. I've got some answers prepared, and then I know we're going into free flow questions afterwards if any come in. So I'm looking
Indeed.
forward.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that, Marcus. And guys, I want you to take advantage of this. We have an active candidate running for Prime Minister at the next general election. This is Marcus White. We're going to be doing this show twice a week. Apologies for the inconvenience of Tuesday. I was on holiday and a whole load of situations got slightly confused. But nevertheless, guys, we're bringing you the Tuesday show today, and it is the questions and answers with Marcus. I have collated, as Marcus quite rightly said there, some questions from the fans. Marcus always comes up with new words I've never heard. Collated, very interesting word there, Marcus. Right.
Toes, Brad.
Indeed. I have to open up the thesaurus for you, Marcus. Okay.
Exactly.
Marcus, first question. This is from one of my loyal fans, my loyal followers that didn't want to be named, but she's asked the question, Marcus. How are you different from all the other politicians?
Right. Well, me and my party are radically different. There's so many different approaches that we take to the problems we have in Britain, and I can't go through them all here. So I've picked out 2 or 3 things to try and answer this question. So the first way we're different is that I will never stand in front of the British public and say I can solve all the problems in Britain. What I will say is that I provide solutions to all the problems in Britain, but every one of those solutions requires everybody in Britain to be behind them. And this is one of the fundamental things that is different about my party. We don't say the government can solve problems. We say all of Britain can solve the problems. Britain will only change as much as the British people change with the government. And my job, if I'm Prime Minister, is to pull everybody together into a team, and so that we solve all the problems we have together as a team. And that's the only way it will get done. So, like I say, this is the first thing that distinguishes us from other parties. We don't claim that we can solve the problems. We claim that Britain can solve the problems and that we have answers for that. And this leads on to the second thing that's different about our party. We believe the route to all of this is to empower everybody. Only if everybody in Britain believes in themselves and believes they can solve the problems they have in their life can we actually solve the problems we have across the country. So my first point leads straight into that, and this is part of our mission statement: empower everyone, solve everything, and fulfill every dream. So I think that's a second very fundamental difference about my party. Our primary goal is to empower everyone.
Yeah.
And then the third thing I could mention is that we will always speak the truth rather than what gets votes. There's many policies we have which at the beginning might be unpopular. For example, last show we talked about cost of living crisis, and our policy is that there isn't a cost of living crisis, there's a knowledge crisis. This isn't a message people necessarily want to hear, but it's the truth, and it's the only thing that will solve the problem. So we are prepared to say things that might initially be unpopular and turn people away, but we believe by being honest about the solution, with time people will see this, and then they feel a great sense of trust and security with my party in the long run. So I think that's the third thing I would suggest is different about our party. And then finally, another aspect of my party is morality. We want to bring morality and law together. So all of morality, basic morality, is enshrined in law at the highest level. So, for example, we would want to make good manners law everywhere in all circumstances. We would want to make respecting people law. And at the moment, we just don't have laws like that. We have piecemeal laws, but we don't have these general moral laws, and we want to put those at the top of society. So again, this is a very radical idea, and it's something that distinguishes us from other parties.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned their morality. We know we've spoken countless times about this, and you have mentioned about making certain things into law, like good behavior, manners, and respect, and all these types of things. People from the outsides will hear things like that, and they will. Most people believe that people have the right to be, what's the word? To be rude, let's just say, to be rude on social media, to have a laugh, to have a crack. And most of the time, people can receive banner, they can take it back. But sometimes it gets to a point where I think we've got to now, and it's got ugly in politics. It's got extremely ugly, it's extremely divisive. And when you say what you're saying, I mean, is there do we need a god-given right to be rude, to be disrespectful, to alienate people, to push all kinds of agendas, to divide and conquer people? Because ultimately people may initially think, oh, that's stupid, why would you do that? But
Yeah.
if you actually really think about it, in a world where it's in law, where you have to be nice to people, where you have to be respectful to people, where you have to treat people the way you would want to be treated, I mean, that sounds like a place where you can actually start building some real foundations from in life. I'm not sure if the public are ready for it, but we'll move on, Marcus, to the next question.
Well, Brad, I totally agree with you. And I think, sorry, before we move on, I think you made really good points. You see, bad manners is the thin end of the wedge. Bad manners grows into discrimination and racism and ultimately violence.
Yep.
And unless you see, it's an absolute fundamental of civilized society that we are all polite and respectful to everybody at all times. And without that, you will set up every other problem you have in the country. And we need to see this simple truth. This is just a simple fundamental basis of civilized society. And without it, you don't stand a chance. And that's my party's position. And we would make it law.
It's true. It's true. And, people will ultimately hear this, and, a lot of people will think it's not a good idea. A lot of people are going to think like you, that people are going to think, oh, you should be able to do what you want. But if we had these things in place, it would be, and everyone, one man, one vote, everyone is equal under God, under law. We wouldn't have some of these wars that we're having now. We wouldn't have
Yeah.
these problems. We wouldn't have these problems. So if you actually really deep it, I mean, you want to protect your right to be rude and be ignorant and be whatever you want to be on social media, when that right is the one thing that could be potentially stopping children from being blown up in other countries. So if you really deep it, guys, this is the way that I think we have to sort of go this way. I'm not sure if the public are ready for it, but I think if it's enforced with real messaging and, I think it will help. I think it will really help. But we'll move on to the
But
next question, Mark.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, right? If everybody has
Yep.
good manners and respect of everybody else, the greater cannot happen. You cannot have discrimination, racism, and violence.
Hmm.
It's just that simple. If everybody maintains good manners and respect, the greater ills cannot happen. And that's how fundamental it is. And that's exactly what you've just said. And
Yep.
that is what we believe.
Yep. 100%. I would be behind it. 100%. I would be. Next question, Marcus, from Elena. The name makes your party sound like it's a really religious group, and it was
Yeah.
slightly off-putting for her, the way she sort of
Yes.
put it to me.
So, Elena, thank you for your question. Yes, we understand your concern. It was a concern of ours when we chose the party name, But we want to be clear, and we've done a whole show on this. We are not a religious party. We require no religious doctrine of anybody. We've chosen the name for a few reasons. The primary one is because we want to empower everybody. We want to challenge everybody, invite everybody in Britain to fully believe in themselves, to be able to solve the problems they've got in their life and create what they want. And it's absolutely central. Yes, I believe it is true. I believe we're all God, and I don't mean that in a religious sense. I mean that we are in control of our lives and what we create. And I need to be honest as a politician about what I stand for and what I believe. But it's simply a statement of empowering everybody. It is not a religious statement at all.
Yeah. And I'm going to move on to I'm going to slightly skim over this because the next question's actually quite similar.
Yeah,
And the name, and this is from an anonymous person as well. The name is too controversial. And Marcus, before you answer that, may I just say I told you a story off air. I was on a beach, a lovely beach, a couple of days ago with some very religious people, and I was speaking about the name "Everyone Is God," the political party that you're the leader of. And I was quite surprised because I was with Muslims, and I would have thought this would have been really hard to sort of, get that message to Muslims that this isn't a religious party. But some of them were actually very much almost in agreement with you as well, and they're very
yeah,
understanding. So my biggest obstacle when I heard the name was it was mainly people of Islam,
yeah.
and I had a really good response from them.
Yeah, so I think you've sort of hit the answer on the head. So the question is that, the name's too controversial?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, about 85% of the world's population either believe in some form of God or deity or some sort of divine aspect to reality. And within the main religions is the idea that God is within us. We just take that a little bit further. So if you look at humanity, the name isn't controversial at all. It's actually closer to the mainstream belief of most people on the planet. To some, it's close to what people generally believe spiritually. So I don't actually think it's controversial at all. I actually feel is a statement that represents the unification of human spiritual belief, not something that's controversial. It's an extension of what is already believed, and it's an invitation for everybody to fully believe in themselves.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that one. I'm with you on that one. Marcus, the next question. We put a clip out. You're known right now. People are seeing you as the guy that told people that are earning minimum wage, if they save half their earnings in 7 years' time, they will have a significant amount of money to
Yeah.
invest and put down as a mortgage. And the question was compound interest and investments, Marcus. How do they get involved? How does a layman, someone that has no idea what an ISA is, how do they get involved in this?
Great, really good question. So there's many ways you can do it, but obviously we've set up something to help people with this. If you go to our website, the address is in the ticker below. If you go to policies at the top, and then underneath that, you'll see the cost of living policy that we have. That cost of living policy, I've written it very much as a guide to everybody to help them get out of any cost of living difficulties they've got. So that will give you all the basic information you need to understand how to manage your money, how to invest, and how to understand investment in all the different routes. It gives you a summary of the complete process of how to manage your money and invest. And it also gives you some links in there that are very helpful. And one of the things I'd encourage people to do most of all is use AI. AI is your almost like an expert on any subject in human knowledge. And you can have extensive conversations with AI where it will answer any questions you have about investment. And by grilling AI and asking all your questions, you'll get all this detailed education you need and find out about everything you need to know about investment. Like I said, there's a good basic guide in our policy. This will help you plug any of those gaps. But also, of course, speak to financial advisors, speak to friends and family. You've got to take yourself on that journey of educating yourself. We want to put all of that into education, but it isn't in education now. And I can't give you all of this knowledge in one question here. So you have to take yourself on a journey of self-education at the moment. We want to fix all of that. But for the time being, you've got everything you need within that policy, and with AI and the other sources mentioned there, you can get all your answers.
Yeah. I think that's really important, that message that you put out there. There's no excuse now.
No,
There's
no,
no excuse for anyone to say they didn't know this, they didn't know that. I mean, once you hear the information, like you told me, Marcus, I knew about ISAs, but I didn't know to the extent. Like, I didn't really
yeah,
sort of deep it and sort
yeah,
of really sort of think about it the way I should have been thinking about it. But that's my own sort of,
yeah,
these are my own limitations in myself, that's my fault. I should have been doing research into this. But I feel like now there will be a lot of people that don't know, and I feel like what would be really helpful for people if we really sort of, right, yeah, at least once a week we touch on this and we really
yes,
try and spread that message out there. We
yes,
can tell you exactly where to go, and
yeah,
maybe even we can come up with some sort of course or something, that
yeah.
will A to B step
And
it sort of thing.
right, on the cost of living policy, I've put four different investment scenarios in there to show people the power of saving and investment, the actual figures in real life. And the last one is a scenario where somebody on minimum wage, I prove with basic figures and basic living costs how somebody on minimum wage can become a millionaire by 59 with basic investment. And the figures are there. So if you don't believe me, just go and have a look at that policy and read the figures for yourself. And this is the power of managing your money, saving and investing. And it's not a complicated strategy. This is boring, standard investment and how it works.
Amazing, Marcus. And over to the next question, another anonymous messenger, personal friend of mine. This one,
Mhm.
your work experience, Michael. People want to know a little bit about your
Yeah.
background, your work experience.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm really proud of my work experience because I feel it really has kept me in touch with, real life and the people of Britain. So I was brought up on a farm. I started work on the farm at about 9 years of age, just doing odd jobs. I understand the reality of, how we produce food, the land. We used to build a lot because we were expanding. So I understand building. Then I was privately educated. I went after I did a degree in physics at Oxford, so I understand the academic world and science. I then, after Oxford, I set up a furniture business, a bespoke furniture business, and I worked on the tools with these hands for about 15 years. And I had a small team as well, great team. And then after that, I went into commercial property development and I developed an ecological business park. And now I'm a landlord for that. And so that's where my main income comes from. So I've done a lot of, I've shoveled muck. I've done a lot of very menial tasks. I've done a lot of the trades. I love manual work, but I've also studied relentlessly as well. So I'm really proud of my working history because it's given me a really good understanding of business economics, practical work, the working people of Britain, and how the country runs.
Hmm. Okay, and that probably leads over to the next question as well. What makes you think you can lead the country, Marcus?
Well, as I've described, the work experience and the business experience has been essential. Um, you know, I've spent my life in training for leadership. It's been an obsession of mine. I've been obsessed with the problems we have and how to solve them. And my work experience has given me a lot of answers to that. So I've really spent my life gathering essential experience for leadership and also gathering all the key areas of knowledge as well that we need to lead effectively. And I just very briefly want to outline what those areas are. What is my experience and understanding, which prepares me for leadership? So I think some of the key things a leader needs to lead is, first of all, they need broad personal experience of life. And I've had that through my working career. I've got key experience of things like economics and business, which are crucial in a country. You need to understand how economics and business and institutions and law works. And I've got all that from my business experience. I've then studied psychology relentlessly throughout my whole life. We are human beings. We're governed by psychology. It drives everything we do, and it drives all our politics and everything that happens in Britain. So that is another key area of knowledge that I believe every leader should have. They need to understand human beings and how to lead them. So I've also got children, so I understand what parenting and all those pressures are. I've had periods in my life where I was extremely poor and on half the minimum wage. So I know what poverty's like. I've had a lot of mental health issues, so I understand the struggles people have with mental health. I've got a wealth of experience in my life, and it prepares me for leadership and it connects me with the people of Britain. And finally, like I said, throughout my whole life, I've been obsessed with the problems we have and how to solve them. And I believe I have answers to all the problems we have in Britain, which include the help and support of everybody in Britain. And they're all detailed on the website in our policies. So that's sort of a quick nutshell of the areas I feel that I've got that we need and a leader needs in order to lead a country.
Mm. Um, how are you, would you say, with, delegating tasks? Because, this seems like a very sort of big sort of job in obviously being a prime minister, being a leader of a country. You've got people from all different departments, like, you might have people from your war council or something giving you advice. Do you feel that, you'd be able to sort of take advice from people? Because that's one of the big criticisms at the minute that's aimed at a lot of, especially Donald Trump, truly at the minute. He doesn't listen to to the professionals in that department. Yes, he's been very good in the business world, but there's going to be different departments where you'll need to hire the best man for the job to do that. Do you think that'd be a problem with you, or?
Well, I'm very open-minded to everybody's views, and one of the things you do as a politician is, and politicians get criticised relentlessly about not listening to the British people, and you know what? Politicians probably are people who listen to the British public more than anybody else because they're constantly campaigning and talking to people. Most people don't live life like that.
Mm.
Absolutely, of course, you need to listen to people. But
Yeah.
also, people present, when you listen to people, they present their problems and they ask us, what are you going to do about that? And I think listening is part of a dialogue, a two-way dialogue. And half of that is listening. And then the other half is then responding to somebody and saying, okay, I hear you have these problems and this is how you can solve it. And when you go through that process, you complete the cycle. And that is the cycle that I want to go through with the British people, where I listen to their problems. I've been doing this all my life, looking at the problems people have and I have. And then saying to them, look, this is how we can solve it and explain it in such simple terms that people understand. And that completes the loop because people then, they feel listened to, they feel that their problems have been understood and they've been shown how there's a way to solve the problem. And that's where I want to get.
Yeah. So we've got the next question here from one of my loyal followers. What are the realistic chances of you being prime minister? And there's also another one which probably ties right into it, so we could probably put them both in together. What are your realistic chances, and is there anyone else that's part of your party as well?
Yeah, well, let me take the first bit, the
Okay,
first
go.
question. So, what are the realistic chances of me being prime minister after the next general election? It is 100% realistic, and there's two reasons why. First of all, we live in a democracy. The people of Britain can vote for whoever they want. If they vote for me and my candidates, I become prime minister. It's just that simple. So democracy is set up to allow anybody to be prime minister, and anybody in the country can be prime minister. And I would encourage anybody to get into politics who wants to. There's nothing stopping anybody. So that's the first reason why it's 100% realistic.
Okay.
It's even more realistic than that because we live in an age of social media. And you know, somebody can be exposed to everybody in the country through one viral video. Through one viral video, you can be in the consciousness of everybody in Britain. So there's no problem with access like we had in the past. It's so open now. And finally, as I was saying before, my view is if I can speak the truth clearly to people and complete that circle, where I listen, I understand people's problems, and then I explain in simple terms solutions to it, this is very compelling. People will vote for that if they see there is somebody who has solutions and can explain to us how we can all help ourselves and solve problems. And that's very powerful. And that is our core strategy, to really have solutions and explain them in a way people understand. And I think if you do that, there's no limit to how quickly a party can rise and enter power.
Okay. And obviously the next question was, who else do you have that's part of your party?
So the other key player in our party is Rosie Morell, who is our ambassador for human relations. She brings a lot of that psychology knowledge to the party and that very human touch. And again, this is where we're a very sex positive party, and she specializes, she's a sex and relationship therapist, and she's also a sex worker. So we are very open about this, and we're a very real party. We connect with the reality of what people are like. We're a sex positive party, and she is a key member in the party.
Wow. Well, Marcus, you mentioned that you've got a sex worker that's a member of your party. I mean, I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't ask you a little bit about that. Most recently, Reform have actually got rid of a member that won his seat in a democracy, in an election. He won his seat for his area, and it was found out that he used to be in the sex industry and he was booted out. And
Yeah.
this raised mixed concerns from people. There are some people that are very much like, you can't sort of mix this kind of stuff with parties and with politics and stuff. And then there's other people that are becoming way more, especially I would say the Green Party, they're becoming way more open in terms of this sort of stuff, very sex positive.
Yeah.
Are you ready for that sort of scrutiny? So if you get called up, one of your councillors, one of your backbench has been involved in, sex work or something. That's not something that would relegate them from your party, then. What you're saying?
Absolutely not. No, we fully encourage free sexual expression and free expression of everything, as long as it's within the law and it's polite and consensual amongst adults. We fully support free expression of anything. As I said, we are positive party, and it's absolutely central to our politics. And our position on this is very strong. We believe we will not resolve our political problems until we resolve human nature. Everything we do in Britain is driven by our human nature, the decisions we make as human beings. And our primary drive in life is sexual drive. That is our primary instinct, and it's at the root of our psychology. Sex is driving all of our psychology. It drives our need for status, our ambition, and the way we construct relationships. And unless we understand human psychology and sexuality in a much deeper way, we'll never resolve any of the political problems we have. And that is absolutely my party's position. And part of that is to be sex positive. The sex work industry, we want to revolutionize that and regulate it and support it and see it as a very valuable aspect of society, a very important profession. I don't know, Brad, you might have seen the Virgin Island on TV.
Yep.
I watched this program, and they've got sex workers there who are working sexually with the virgins, who are involved in this television series.
Okay.
And that is sort of more like the model we're looking at here. They've got professional trained therapists who ultimately are having sex with these people as a healing and training process for them to help them with the issues they've got. And that's how we feel the whole sex work industry needs to be framed. You know, sex is a healing thing when you understand it properly, and it's a very valuable emotional thing, and for health. So this knowledge is crucial. Everybody needs this knowledge, and this is part of my party's mission, to educate everybody with all this knowledge of themselves and how they're being driven in their life.
Well, let me put the question out there, guys. Do you think do you think people that are in sex work should be involved in politics? I'll put it out to the public, and guys, I definitely want to hear your perspective on this. This is very important. I also say people shouldn't demonize. There's a lot of demonization that goes on towards women that work in the industry. I find it very ironic when it comes from men, because I believe most men have had an experience with, either via material, social media, whatever it is. But guys have a relationship. Most men have a relationship with sex, porn, all the rest of it at some point in their life.
Yeah,
And to demonize people that are in that industry, knowing, and I've personally met men that their life has been saved. They were going through really hard times, really deep mental health struggles that they were going through. And the only thing that kept them sane was speaking to a sex therapist, and someone that was able to relate to them, understand them, help them. Things that
yeah,
they didn't feel comfortable telling anyone, they tell people that work in the sex industry. So this is a very valuable service that these people are
yes,
offering to people, and you can't even comprehend the understanding of the
yeah,
amount of people that, like, I believe there's over 500,000 people in the industry in this country alone. So maybe even more in terms of other fields. I was particularly talking about something else, but we'll move on from there, Marcus.
okay,
Okay, this was an interesting one, Marcus.
yeah.
One of your immigration clips was seen. Stance on immigration. How would you stop the boats, Marcus?
Okay, so this is a very important and challenging question. Our policy is that we want to stop the boats dead, definitely. Now, to do that, I feel, you see, this issue has been very divisive across Britain, and politicians struggle with this issue hugely. And what I want to do here is just try and explain to people why this issue is very tricky to solve, but how there is a solution, but it's quite a radical solution. Now, there's a number of problems with stopping boats. The first one is legal problems. We're signed into the UN Charter of Human Rights. And there's also, I believe, other agreements we're signed into as well, which means that we have to treat refugees in a certain way. And it calls into question legally whether, according to those agreements, you're actually allowed to stop boats, or whether you've got to take them in. So there's a whole legal issue there with the UN that needs resolving if we're to stop boats. Then the other side of it is the actual practical process of doing it. How do you physically stop boats? Now, asking France to police the border isn't working. So that doesn't work. So you end up having to do it yourself, Britain. And really, how do you go out into the channel and turn boats around and send them back to France? You physically have to do it. I think this is where it gets very tough, because the channel is a very busy shipping lane, and if you start turning boats around in that channel, at some point you're going to get a collision. You've got container ships just going through there all the time, both ways through the channel, and you're going to get, some of these boats are going to be hit by container ships, and there's going to be a disaster. So you've got a very difficult practical situation there with turning around boats. The model we would choose to solve this is the Australian model, which has the strictest policy on immigration illegally by boats across the sea. And what they do is they intercept the boats and they turn them around physically if the boats are seaworthy, and send them back, which is quite a difficult process in itself. Or if the boats aren't seaworthy, they actually provide a boat and fuel that is safe, with enough fuel in it to get them back to where they've come from. And they put people in new boats. And this seems to be the best practical solution. And I think this is the one we would try and adopt. But you can see this, some people are going to find this very controversial. There's a lot of disagreement on this. So if we're to solve this problem of turning boats around, you've got to have the support of the British people. Otherwise, you're just going to cause, a lot of conflict within Britain about the two different sides of this argument. So it's a complex problem to solve, but I think ultimately we would do something similar to the Australians. We believe it's not good for Britain to allow people to enter illegally. We want a balanced legal immigration policy. And as part of that, you've got to stop the boats in the best way possible.
And listening to like I say to you, I go to a lot of the rallies. I speak to a lot of the people there. The biggest thing that is thrown out there is that it's not women and children on the boats. People would be so much more open to this if it wasn't just all men. If they're not, like listening to Kemi Bodenick the other day, there's obvious loopholes. There are people that are coming here from, let's just say, African countries where being gay is, it's the death penalty in some countries, and they are coming here under that, and then getting married to a woman 2 years later. These are kind of loopholes that are in play at the minute, and it's open. Like, anyone from any African country where the death penalty is there for being homosexual, they can come over here, get here by hook or by crook, and use that lie, and get their visa, get all their application for asylum accepted.
Well, I think this highlights why you need a balanced legal immigration system. You've got to stop illegal immigration and then allow people to come in the right way in an amount that we can deal with. We can't solve all the world's problems. We're a small island nation. There's only so many people we can take in, and I want Britain to play its part in that and take in immigrants. But it's got to be legal, it's got to be balanced, and it's got to be constructive for everybody. And we can't take all the people in the world that have a problem within their country. There's hundreds of millions of them. And, we have to be realistic about this. We have to limit the number of people who come in, and we have to make sure they come in a way that is constructive for everybody and doesn't cause social unrest in this country.
Yeah.
So, that is our policy, and we'll do everything we can to achieve that.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of conspiracies out there that do believe that there are forces at work here trying to just bring in, like you said, hundreds of we know that the population of the population of the UK, I think the birth rate's at 1.2 or 1.4, and for a population to sustain itself, it has to be a minimum at over 2, doesn't it? And there. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of people saying that what they're doing is they're trying to solve that problem, because obviously it will be a massive problem if we don't have enough people to look after each other, to replace each other. Do you think there's any sort of government enforce or forces at work here trying to bring people in? Because it does seem like they're just allowing certain things to go on, and especially it's almost like if you put people straight in a hotel or if you put people in a hotel, they know that's what's waiting for them as soon as they come here. It does seem like you're inviting this on yourself.
I mean, look, I can't speak for government. I'm not in the Labour Party, and I don't know all the workings that's going on. My view is that I don't think there's any agenda on the part of the government or probably any of the parties to bring in lots of people through some sort of backdoor method. No. Why people are going into hotels is, I think, precisely for the reasons that I've described. It's actually legally and practically a challenging problem to stop boats.
Yeah.
And it requires the British public to support a controversial policy of turning people away, many of which are in genuine need. This is a difficult thing to do, and people have compassion. And sometimes this is a very tough policy to turn boats away. So, politicians, you see, the thing is, I'm not one, as you know, Brad. I don't believe in attacking the other parties at all. You know, I believe part of my job as a leader is to unite all the parties, because different people are voting for different parties. And if I go around attacking all the other parties, what I'm saying is everybody who doesn't vote for me is silly. I'm attacking everybody in Britain who doesn't vote for my party. And I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is try and give the British public a realistic understanding of the challenges politicians have and why they're struggling to solve these problems. And the, boats coming across is absolutely one of those problems. There aren't easy solutions to this. And there are solutions, but they're very tough. And will people stand behind that and be happy with it, or will it cause civil unrest? So I'm very sympathetic to all the politicians who are struggling to solve this problem in the Labour Party and in the Conservative Party before them. And I'm sympathetic to the British people who get frustrated when the problem isn't solved. I'm trying to explain the truth of all of that, why it's not getting solved, and the tough decisions we would all have to stand by if we really do want to solve it. And that is turning people away in boats who are, maybe coming from countries where there's violence and all the other problems they've got. That is the challenge here. So, I don't think there's some dodgy agenda on the part of politicians. I just think it's a difficult problem without an easy solution.
Yeah. But with the birth rate, if with the birth rate at 1.2, that is a real problem, isn't it? That's a real problem.
Right. So it's a really interesting and profound question, this, for politics. The whole world is going through an evolution. The Western countries, their birth rate is dropping below 2. And we're starting to see population decrease in Western countries. And we're getting aging populations, and countries like Japan are really struggling with this. There are areas of the world, particularly Africa and South America, where there's still high birth rates, and that is where world population increase is coming from. So we're seeing this it's a tale of two stories about world population growth and also depopulation. The West is depopulating, certain other areas of the world are increasing population. Now, humanity is going to have to go through how can I put it, a population revolution, because we've got to stabilize world population. If we keep growing, we're just going to decimate the planet. So we have to stabilize world population. And that means birth rates are going to go down and we will get a more elderly population. But this is a cycle we have to go through. And I certainly don't believe in Britain. My view is we should actually set immigration to just very slightly reduce population in this country, very slowly, to try not, so we don't build up a huge aging population. And we do that with a balanced immigration policy, because our own native population is slightly decreasing in this country. So we plug that gap with legal immigration. But I think Britain as a country is slightly overpopulated. We're very densely populated. It pushes property prices up, it pushes land prices up. It just creates a much more intense country. It causes environmental problems with river pollution and such like. So I think a very slow population reduction would actually be healthy in the long run for Britain. So, there's a lot of issues going on.
Yeah. It's a long one to go over, and we'll
It's
summarize.
many issues. We could do a whole podcast on this.
Yeah. And question over here from an anonymous person. Your stance on the death penalty, and before you answer that, there are people that believe, and this is coming from masses of people now. They believe that crime has got out of control, there's no repercussions anymore, and people would openly support the death penalty. You've got people that are stabbing people, killing people, and getting 10-year sentences. It just doesn't, people just don't seem to think the sentences are strong enough for now.
I would agree. I think our criminal justice system in this country and most countries in the world does not have the authority that it needs. A criminal justice system needs to be fully charged with enough authority to stop crime and act as a deterrent. It also needs to rehabilitate properly prisoners, and we've got a whole policy on this. Our our rehabilitation and prison policy, and our criminal justice policy. But let's stick to the death penalty. Our position is this: if a country invaded us and attacks us violently and is shooting us and is violently attacking us, we use lethal force to defend ourselves. And almost nobody questions this principle. If somebody violently attacks you, it is reasonable to use lethal force to defend yourself. This principle doesn't roll over into our criminal justice system because we don't have the death penalty. So as things stand at the moment, people can be as violent as they like to an extreme and still not have violent force used against them to defend people against them. And I think that is fundamentally wrong. We should be able to use lethal force in our criminal justice system, just as we use it with the military if somebody invaded us. If a group of people invade us, nobody questions it. Yes, go to war, send soldiers with guns. But if it's an individual, suddenly people have a problem with it. And there's no difference as far as I can see. The moral implication and the practical implication is the same. However, and I want to be really clear on this, I think the place for the death penalty is very limited indeed. And it is this: it's where you have an individual who is repeatedly violent, and it should only be used when they've had all opportunities to reform themselves properly. And by that I mean where there's a proper rehabilitation program in prisons, which we don't have at the moment because there isn't a resource for it. So what I'm saying is, in our system, if somebody commits, say, murder or even serial killers, would we have the death penalty for that? No, I believe everybody has the right to reform themselves. But if you take somebody who's very violent and they're convicted and they go into the prison system and then they continue to be repeatedly violent and they've gone right through a comprehensive rehabilitation program and they've been given every opportunity to reform, and if they are still committed to violence, you've only got two choices left. You lock them up for the rest of their life in solitary confinement so they can't attack others, which the taxpayer pays for,
Yep.
or you execute them. And that seems to me the only options available with these type of people. And there's not many of them, but there are some. And in that extreme case, our party's position is that that is the case where the death penalty is the better solution, because I don't see why the taxpayer should pay to lock somebody up for 20 or 30 years at 50 or 100,000 pounds a year when that person is committed to attacking and hurting other people. They should be dealt with just like you would deal with them in war and use lethal force. So that is, I think, the best option, and that is our position.
Okay. Because I listen to a lot of people, and they're very serious when it comes to this. And if there was a referendum today, let's just be very honest. If there was a referendum today on the death penalty being in place for people that commit crimes against children and stuff like that, or
Yeah.
people that go out and stab people,
Yeah.
overwhelmingly, the British public, in my opinion, from what I've seen from people, would that would be enough. That would be enough to get at least 50% of the votes, I think, personally, from what I've heard and what people say. There are some parts in America. There are some parts in America that obviously already have the death penalty in place for people
Yeah.
that commit these
Well,
crimes.
look, this is a really interesting question, and this goes very much to the heart of my party and why we're different. Now, I don't know what would happen if we had a referendum on the death penalty in this country. That's speculative. I've got no idea what would happen and how people would vote. One of the things my party wants to do is to give everybody a full understanding of the path to serious crime, what that looks like. Because if people of Britain, everybody doesn't understand how you get from a child who's born to a child who is committing serial murder or rape or child abuse or whatever it is, if you can't understand that path and that journey, you will never solve the problem of crime. Now, the automatic idea people are given is that there's sort of something wrong with these people. They're born bad. And I don't believe this is true in the slightest. And I certainly don't believe it will ever solve the problem. If we continue to have that view that these people are just born bad, there's something wrong with them, and if they commit a load of really bad crimes, you execute them. I don't think that will ever solve the problem because it's not getting to the root of the problem. The root of all crime, and there's lots and lots of evidence for this, is to do with the way they're parented, the trauma they had in their childhood, and then what they're educated after that. You see, the prison system is a last defense. The criminal justice system is the last defense against crime. It never solves the root problem of crime. The root problem is created in homes where children have traumatic upbringings. No human being becomes violent at a chance. They become violent because they've had intense trauma in their childhood. And that is where we need to have this much greater understanding of crime. And this is why we place parenting as central in our politics. Because if you don't ensure that every child is parented correctly, you will continually create all the problems we have in society, including serious crime. So, do you see? We
Yep.
do believe in the death penalty, but we don't believe it as a blanket policy. Anybody who's done really bad things, you kill them. No, that doesn't address the root of the problem, and it doesn't allow them to have the opportunity to rehabilitate
What
themselves.
about if that's what the people want though, Marcus? Like,
Okay,
if you're prime
great.
minister, you do a referendum. It comes up at over 50 to 60% that people are in favor of death penalty for people that commit these crimes. They don't want to. I totally get what you're saying. You have to understand and you have to tackle it at the source when they're young, and you have to try and work out. That's going to be an interesting way of doing it. I don't know, but people for the men, especially people that have had their daughters or someone attacked in the street or maybe even killed or essayed, whatever it is, people want justice. The mob want justice. Oh, are you as prime minister? You've got a 60% overwhelming vote in favour of the death penalty. What do you do, Marcus?
I'll tell you exactly what I do. I'll stick to my guns, and this is exactly how we differentiate ourselves as a party. I will never, ever bow down to that view, ever. If 90% of Britain said, for these crimes, if you commit them and you're convicted, you get executed, full stop. I'll tell you what I'll say to those people. You will never, ever solve this problem like that. You'll probably make it worse. And I cannot commit to that policy, and I won't. And if that means I don't get voted into power, I won't get voted into power. I'll stick to my guns on this. To the day I die, I will always say the only way you'll solve the problem of serious crime is through psychology, understanding human beings, that path to serious crime, and making sure every child is parented properly in a calm, loving home without trauma. So, and I think history supports this. There's death penalties all around the world in countries. It never stops serious crime. History does not support this view. So,
Is there any sort of, it might not solve the problem long term, but is there anything that maybe says that the victims, like, someone that's lost their child to heinous crimes, like someone's just put in the comments,
yeah,
they get justice, they feel justice, because a lot of
okay,
people feel, Marcus, that people are committing crimes in this country, especially in the UK, and they're sitting in not luxury prisons, but they're in jail. Most of them have got TVs, most of them have got computers, which I understand to an extent. But how do you explain to someone that's had their child essayed or attacked or stabbed even and killed, that the person that done that is sat in a prison, they're playing computer all day long, they're working out, they've got gym, they've got access to all these books and stuff, and you're left with the grief?
Right. So, firstly, our policy, they wouldn't be playing on a computer all day long and watching TV. They'd be working and they would be funding the cost of their prison stay.
Okay.
So, straight away, it's a different environment. And in our system, they'd be in an incredibly strict system where they have to do that. Otherwise, there's serious consequences. And they would have full rehabilitation. Now, look, I want to put it to people like this, okay? And this is the thing, I keep saying this. If we want to solve crime, we've got to understand that path of how an innocent child who is born to a woman, an innocent baby, gets to becoming a rapist or a murderer or a paedophile. If we can't answer that question, how do you get from A to B? You'll never solve crime. Now, here's the thing, okay? I'll tell you what that path looks like. So the parents, there will be parents who might be watching this now, their child has been murdered or raped. And, my heart goes out to them. And I want to solve this problem properly so it never happens. But you've got to understand the person who committed that crime, I'm not justifying their crimes whatsoever. I'm saying that, let's say it's a man who murders somebody. I know somebody very closely who was prison officer in a sex offenders prison, okay? And he quite violently, multiply raped. Now, this officer I know, as part of their job, developed a close relationship with this inmate. And through that process of getting to know this person, the inmate started explaining his life story and the abuse he experienced at the hands of his father. The terrible abuse he had, violent physical abuse, psychological abuse, sustained over years, and how the mother turned her back to it and did nothing to stop it. Now, if you take children, particularly males, and you expose them to the terror of physical, sexual, emotional abuse systematically from potentially not long after birth onwards, for the entirety of their upbringing, any human being becomes extremely disturbed by that. This is basic human psychology. So disturbed, you get to the point where you can't distinguish and connect with people's feelings anymore. And you're so terrified inside that you can be driven to these terrible crimes and all sorts of things. There's a whole psychology of this.
Okay.
So do you see?
I get what you mean, Marcus, and this is something that it's a hot topic, and I think we'll have to do a whole show just on this,
Definitely,
and maybe
definitely.
have some answers towards it. Just quickly, Claire's just put, what would the serious consequences be if someone refuses to work and pay their way in the prison? You could just answer it quickly, and then we'll move on to the
This
next
is
one.
a really hot topic. In our system, privileges would be reduced. We believe their privileges should be reduced until the point at which they say, yeah, I'm going to work. And it just gets tougher and tougher and tougher until the point comes, they says, you know what, I'm going to be a lot happier if I work, and then I can have my basic comforts in life.
Would you be in favor of violence towards them should they not pay their dues or do what's required of them?
No, I don't believe there's a place for it, because if you use violence as a form of punishment, you're defeating everything you're trying to do. You're saying we want to stop violence and you shouldn't be violent, but then we're going to be violent back to you. It's a fundamental contradiction, and you've got to understand, right? These people who commit serious crime, psychologically, they are terrified little children. That is what's driving these crimes. And this is the irony, one of the huge ironies of serious crime. These men who are very violent, what their behavior is coming from a place of the terrified little boy inside of them. It's not coming from like a male macho thing of they want to go out and hurt people. It's coming from a place of childhood trauma. And unless you address that problem, you will not stop this violent behavior in men and women.
Yeah.
You know, you just can't have these simplistic approaches that don't work. You've got to get to the truth of it. And the only way you'll stop violent crime is by regulating parenting and supporting it properly. It is the only way it will ever solve. And we've got to address all our attentions to that. Otherwise, it will continue on just as it has for the last 10,000 years.
Okay. Like I said, guys, we will come back to Marcus on this one. We'll do a whole show on it. I think that would be the only way to sort of really dig into this, because people have different views, really conflicting views.
Yeah,
Most people believe that this country, it's got too soft. It's way too soft.
it is too soft.
The kids
We
are way
agree with
too, the kids and the adults are way too entitled. It makes me physically sick when I've seen someone commit a crime and then I've seen them being interviewed by the police, and it's no comment, no
But
comment, no comment.
our rehabilitation and prison policy is far, far, far stricter than what we have now.
Okay.
It's actually a policy of 100% authority combined with 100% rehabilitation. Our policy is incredibly strict and stringent. People in prison will have to fall in line and pay the costs of their crimes financially. Otherwise, there will be serious consequences.
Yeah.
And they will not get out of prison until they are fully rehabilitated. Our
Yeah.
prison sentences would be minimum sentences, not maximum.
Yeah.
So if somebody commits murder and they have a 20-year sentence, at 20 years, if they're not fully rehabilitated and they're not behaving completely functionally in prison, they will stay in prison. So our system would be far, far more authoritative than it is now. But it will also be combined with complete compassionate rehabilitation. So I agree, things need to be tougher, but they also need to be more rehabilitative.
Okay. Marcus, like I said, we will definitely do a full show on this. This is an active podcast. Twice a week, we will be doing this. Any sort of discussions that you guys want us to do comment on the videos, or you can private message me personally. And we'll go through this. But Marcus, final question. We've gone on for a while here. Marcus, what would be the first thing you would do, or what would be the first thing you would change if you were in power?
One of the first things would be education. We'd completely restructure the education system so that people are taught all the things they need to know to master themselves and understand adult life. And I'm talking things like money management, parenting, relationships, in the working environment, and also psychology, understanding themselves and mastering themselves. So education would be the first thing. Second on my agenda would be criminal justice. All these issues we're talking about, that would be on there. And thirdly, we talked about moral law. We want to place morality into law and bring those two things into one unified system. So that would be three of the main things we would concentrate on.
Okay. Wow, we've had a hell of a show there, Marcus. It's refreshing, like I say, to get a candidate running for prime minister that wants to answer the tough questions that fans and the people are asking. Guys, our next show is tomorrow at 1:00. Marcus, anything you want to say before we go?
Yes, well, look, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's show. It's about mental health, isn't it? I think that's what we're doing.
Indeed.
And,
Mental health for men, breaking
yeah,
it down. We're going to be going back and forth. We're going to open it up a little bit because I do believe, a lot of problems come from this mental health where men are struggling and they go out and they'll do things that maybe they wouldn't do if they were thinking rationally, or if they weren't, sometimes it's just good to open up. It's something that I've really struggled in my life story podcast to get more men on, to get them to talk. Everyone wants to put that face that we were speaking about, that macho sort of side on the outside, and then it's the little guy inside that's really struggling and going through all the pain and not opening up.
I think it's really good that you said that, because tomorrow the mask is coming off and I'm going to be honest about the challenges I've had with mental health and how this has been an asset to me and given me a much deeper insight into people and the struggles that people of Britain have. And, we're going to be going right through all of that and other issues around mental health. So I hope, it's going to be a really interesting and relevant show to many people. And we always want, we always welcome the hard questions from the public. So,
Yeah. And Marcus,
here.
if you were just speaking to some of the men out there going through it and wanting them to giving them any sort of advice, what would you say to them? And
So I think the first thing I'd say is talk to people always, and particularly get professional help. I would say always believe in yourself. And I would say, use AI and go online to get information and understanding about mental health issues, and go on that journey of resolving your mental health issues and seeing them as an asset in your life.
okie dokie. Guys, thank you very much for joining us on the show. My 3 o'clock show is on as normal. Everyone is God Political Podcast. Everyone, peace and love to you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you everyone for watching. I'm Marcus White, leader of Everyone is God, Britain's most visionary political party. Subscribe to us on YouTube or visit our website if you would like to find out more and get involved.